Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel. I'm your host, I'm a Melee Kirby, and today we're going to be looking at the 5 remaining characters who we haven't talked about yet from Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, those being Gonzalez, Echidna, Bartre, Karel, and Fur. I suppose Roy also, we have not examined any of his supports yet, at least from his angle. But we will be getting to Roy, don't you worry. So, sorry for screwing up the release stuff. Long story short, I had one SSS episode and 2 main episodes recorded, and all I needed to do was edit them and then record and edit the last SSS episode, which these are usually pretty short, so I didn't think it would be that tall of an order. Turns out, I'm away from my home for a few days, and so I brought my hard drive, my external hard drive, and I put the episodes on it so that I could edit them while I was away. It turns out that I did not copy all of the files that I needed to, so stupid mistake on my part. I'm going to be back home later in the week, and from there I can edit the episodes. So hopefully those last 2 episodes will be out by the weekend. Fingers crossed, no promises, but I'm going to try my best. But for now, I can still bring you that good support analysis content. I'm looking forward to these guys today. I read through some of the supports earlier, or the other day, and I was pleasantly surprised because I did not remember most of these characters being that interesting. Especially like Bartre and Fur. I did not think they were a very interesting character, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I was pleasantly surprised by how much I like these characters more than I was expecting to. So without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get started, and let's take a look at Gonzalez to start off with. Gonzalez supports 6 characters. He supports Trek, Lilina, Echidna, Bartre, Garrett, and Diane. Now, the thing about Gonzalez is that he is a pretty comedy-oriented character. I would say that 2, maybe 3 of his supports are like pure comedy-focused. The Trek one, which I think is actually really, really good character building for Trek, but for Gonzalez, it's just kind of whatever. I'm not even going to talk about it. And then the Diane one is also pretty much just a comedy support. I think it's probably one of Diane's worst ones. It's not a bad support. It's just, kind of whatever. But the remaining 4 I do want to talk about because I think all of them contribute to Gonzalez's character in a meaningful way. I would say overall Gonzalez is a character that's he's very, he's kind of basic, right? He's not really trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. He is a dumb, ugly guy. Not to be mean, but that's kind of how other characters describe him. He's dumb and he's ugly, but he wants to be liked. He wants people to like him, and instead of being scared of him or, making fun of him, he wants people to respect him and look up to him. And so he realizes that the way to do that is by doing the right thing and helping people. And I think this is actually reflected in his character ending, where at the end of the game, he goes back home to his village and he's greeted by cheers and applause instead of people being scared of him, which I think is just very sweet. It's a nice little capstone to his character. Now, all of his supports that I didn't, besides the Trek one and besides the Diane one, I think reflect this in some way or another. We'll start with the Lilina one. The Lilina one is actually pretty simple. It's basically just him and her chatting about various things, like Lilina explaining the concept of gratitude to him, which is very nice. The B support is Lilina mentioning Roy and Gonzalez getting jealous, which is really weird. I'll address the elephant in the room. I think that this is a cute support, but of course Lilina is a 15-ish year old girl, and Gonzalez is like, I don't know, it looks like he's in his 30s. And it does have some romantic subtext there, which is gross. Gonzalez is, I think I mentioned this actually, Gonzalez is like very mentally delayed, I guess you could say, or mentally handicapped, which makes it doesn't really make it better. It just makes it gross in both directions now. I hate to ruin everything with like being overly critical or whatever. It's cute, you know, like it's not, I don't want to cancel Fire Emblem 6. You know, it's fine. It's I don't think anyone's really banging down IS's door with this one, but I think it's just worth noting because it's a little weird if you break it down and think about it. But I do understand why Gonzalez would fall in love with Lilina. I mean, I don't really understand the reverse as much, but Lilina, I mean, Gonzalez says it best. He says that Lilina is the reason that he was able to stay human. When he was going to on Nord's, I think it's Nord, because I remember making fun of NordVPN. It was a shaman or a druid in Chapter 10A. And I guess in Chapter 10B, it was a similar deal where he was on his way to destroy some villages on the orders of, you know, a boss or whatever. And Lilina steps in and convinces him that that's wrong and that he shouldn't do that. And he is incredibly grateful to her because otherwise he would have become a murderer. And he, you know, he's extremely grateful that that did not happen. So overall, I think that's a pretty good mentality. I can understand why Gonzalez would have an affection for Lilina in that circumstance. It's just I just think it's a little creepy, but you know. Yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say about it. Moving on to the Echidna support. Moving on to the Garrett support. The Garrett support does more for Garrett than it does for Gonzalez, admittedly. But I still think it's a pretty good support for Gonzalez because I think it just displays... it explores some basic information about his character, first of all, expositing that he doesn't have any parents. But then it also shows that he's just a nice guy. You know, he at his core... he is a good person, and I think that is ultimately what his character is all about, right? He is a monster on the outside, but on the inside, he is someone that is worth looking up to and respecting. And they kind of hammer that point in a little bit more than is maybe necessary, but you know, it's fine. He's not a very complex character. What he does for Garrett here is that he gives Garrett a flower. I think he also gave Lilina a flower. He just likes flowers, I guess, which is cute. And it turns out Garrett recognizes it because his mom used to use it for like medicine or something. Something like that. And yeah, they have a little bit of a conversation about that. It's nothing special, but it's nice. All right. The Bartre support is... The Bartre support is like all of Bartre's other supports. It's him being a himbo king who we stan and trying to explain to Gonzalez how to be strong. First, he tells Gonzalez to hit him as hard as he can. And Gonzalez says no, and so Bartre hits him as hard as he can. And Gonzalez is like, why'd you do that? I didn't want to hit you. Why are you doing this? And then the B support is Gonzalez talking about getting armor, and then Bartre says, no, he says, like, the best offense is a good defense, or something like that, or the other way around. And he's like, okay, well, in that case, I'll go buy an axe. And Bartre is like, no, don't buy an axe either. You're supposed to be strong with your muscles, not with your weapons. And Gonzalez doesn't really get it. I don't really get it either. It's because Bartre's just being stupid. But he's being funny. And then the A support is just Bartre rambling and not letting Gonzalez get a word in edgewise, which is very funny. We'll get more to Bartre later, but Bartre's supports are mostly comedy focused, but I think they're all really good in spite of that. So I'm not really complaining or anything. All right, and finally the Echidna support. Basically, Echidna goes up to Gonzalez and says, "Dude, you look huge," and asks him to help her build a town. Like, there's a through line through a lot of her supports, which we'll see later. She wants to build a village for all the people who lost their homes in the uprising on the Western Isles. And she asks Gonzalez to help her do that. And she convinces him by basically telling him, if you do this, people are going to like you more. And he's like, all right, I'm in. Which is cute. And ultimately, she tries to teach him a lesson about how even though he's big and dumb and ugly, there are things that he is good at, and people will learn to love and appreciate him for that, which is really the closest that any support gets to actually addressing the core themes of his character. So it's probably one of the better ones, I think. But overall, Gonzalez is not. I think there's like a good character concept here. I almost want to say there's a lot of potential, but I don't think that's even really necessarily what I mean. It's more like his character, like he would fit right at home in a game without supports, you know? Like I think if he was in Yggdrasil or basically in Yggdrasil, I guess in Arcanea, he would be fine. You know, I think this is a character concept that you don't really need to expand on. I think it's kind of pretty apparent what it's about on the tin, and I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that basic kind of concept. Unfortunately, you know, it's not to say that you can't build on it, and I think they definitely could have here, and they didn't really, which is a shame. But it's not the end of the world. I like him enough just for his basic character concept alone. And he's also up there with Lou as one of my favorite characters to use in gameplay. So overall, I like Gonzalez quite a bit. But in terms of his supports, he's a little bit on the lacking side. Okay, next up we'll do Echidna. Echidna has 5 support partners: Gonzalez, as we saw, but then also Larum, Wade, Lot, and Geese. The Wade and Lot supports are both very interesting. They're almost identical. Basically, Wade, she approaches both of them and asks them to contribute to that village that I mentioned in the previous, in the Gonzalez support. She's working on that village. She really wants big, able-bodied men to come and help. And both of them basically say, probably not, but we'll think about it. Actually, no, that's not true. Lot agrees pretty much on the spot. The approach that she takes with Wade is to kind of like goad him a little bit and, you know, make him like rile him up a little bit. Eventually, he finds out that she finds out that he has a sister, and she kind of admonishes him and says, "Don't fucking help me. Go back to your sister and make sure that you return to her safely," which I think just goes to exemplify Echidna's values. You know, like she's really invested in this village. That is like her number one goal in life right now is to make this village. But even then, she's like, you should put family first. We never actually hear. I only briefly read through her supports, so I could be wrong. I'm going to double check all of them, but I don't think we hear anything about her family at all, if she even has one. So could be something interesting there. But you know, we just don't know. It would be complete headcanon to assume anything based on that. More likely, she's just kind of a nice person who understands the value of family. The Lot support is more interesting. I talk about it a little bit in the Lot and Wade episode, obviously. But I think that Lot kind of puts on his doomer hat here a little bit and is kind of just like, oh, you know, I'm probably going to die, you know, assuming I survive. The enemy's constantly getting stronger. I don't know if I'll make it. And basically Echidna tells him to shut the fuck up and stop worrying about it. And that even if he does die, she'll be there to help him and take care of his family and all that, which Lot muses at the end is kind of her best attempt at making him feel better, which I think is funny, first of all, and it kind of it is a good goof, but then also really exemplifies both Echidna's kind heart as well as her kind of lack of emotional intelligence, thinking that that's really the best way that she could possibly, cheer him up. It's quite funny. I don't really have much to add about Echidna in these supports, but she's pretty good. I like her. Okay, I'm realizing now that literally every single one of her supports mentions the village that she wants to build, which is it's not a bad thing. You know, it's nice that there's a little narrative consistency, like a through line and all that, but it's a little silly. The Geese support is pretty basic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's basically just the Geese backstory support. And obviously does a lot more for Geese than it does for Echidna. There is one line that Echidna has that I think is good, where she tells Geese, they're talking about like a treasure map that he found or something, and she tells Geese, but you know that no amount of praying or worrying is going to get you that treasure, right? You have to take action, which I think kind of ties into what we saw in the lot support with her basically telling him to stop worrying so much. She is a very action oriented person, and her whole demeanor seems to be like, there's no point worrying about shit I can't control. I just need to put things into action. If I want anything to be accomplished, I need to take action. That seems to be her character for the most part, and I think it's neat. They don't really expand on it too much, but it's fine. It's good. Gonzalez support we already looked at. Again, exemplifying Echidna's lack of emotional intelligence, basically saying, well, yeah, you're ugly and stupid, but which is funny, I think it's good. She says, all right, Gonzalez, I don't believe in that as long as you have a kind heart crap. You're ugly. People made fun of you because of it. But then she goes on to give him a pep talk. So, like, ultimately, I think Echidna does have a lot of really good things to say, a lot of very valuable things to say, but you need to get past her very blunt demeanor in order to get to the heart of that. And not everyone's able to do that. She's even that way with Larum. She's like, your cooking sucks ass. Stop cooking, please. I don't want to die. I will die if I eat your cooking. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about Echidna. I think she's a fine character, with some cool supports, and she's not my favorite character in the world. She's certainly not at the bottom of this game's tier list. That's for sure. She's fine. She's all right. Not really much else to say there. But next up, we're moving on to some characters who I do feel a little bit strongly about. More strongly than Echidna, definitely. Next up, we're going to talk about Fur. Fur supports 5 characters: Rutger, Noah, Shin, Bartre, and Karel. Basically, her fucking character can be summed up to swords. That's not entirely true, but she does talk a lot about swords. Her Karel and her Rutger support are all about swords and like the path of the sword, the way of the sword. And I mean, I think it's good. I think Fur is young and she is very ambitious. She wants to come into her own as a martial artist, and she thinks that the best way to do that is to look up to others for inspiration. Rutger and Karel being 2 obvious examples, but they both have to sit down and teach her the lesson that the path of the sword is different for everybody. What works for Rutger isn't going to be what works for Karel, isn't going to be what works for Fur, etc., etc. And both of them give her alternative perspectives on what it means to be a swords person. Rutger obviously being the very edgy, like, oh, I only use my sword if I intend to kill somebody. And Karel being a little bit more chill about the whole thing. So from that perspective, those 2 supports are pretty similar in terms of the effect they have on Fur. I think they're both pretty good. I think Fur, the young plucky swords person who needs to learn how to think and live their own path, it's pretty generic, but it's fine. It's a classic. It's pretty good. I do remember really liking the Shin support, which is I drew attention to this, the fact that Fur does not remember her clan. Basically, it's just not a part of who she lives and how she chooses to live. The Sakaean clan that she belongs to does not really matter to her. But I think that does more for Shin than Fur. Basically teaching Shin that there are many different ways to be a Sakaean. I think you could see that as an interesting reflection of Fur, and his lesson is that there's many different ways to be a swordsman. And in the same vein, Shin has to learn that everybody goes about their journey through life as a Sakaean in their own way. And I think they kind of mirror each other in that sense, but that's definitely deeper than I think the writers probably thought about it, but it's still worth talking about, I think. The Noah support is pretty much just a Fur falling in love with Noah thing. She does say that he is like making her, like distracting her from the path of the sword or whatever, which I think is meaningful because obviously that means so much to her. So the effect that he is having on her must be very significant. But she doesn't really, she doesn't give a whole lot of detail about that, which is fine. It's not really worth focusing on, I don't think. And then, of course, the Bartre support is a real hoot. Bartre being an overbearing dad, and for having to talk to him about that. There's a bit in the A support which is really nice about, Bartre regretting how little attention he gave her as a kid and trying to make up for lost time. And they have a sweet little heart-to-heart about that. I think for, at a stretch, admittedly, you could say that Fur learns a good lesson about how, she's so eager to be an independent adult, and become a master swordsman or whatever. She always has her eyes on that goal. I think it's nice to see Bartre kind of bringing her back down to earth a little bit and reminding her that sometimes it's okay to still be your father's daughter and to, let him be a little protective of you, especially since, she's quite young, I think. I don't think she's any older than like 16 or 17 or whatever. So, yeah, I think it's nice. Overall, Fur, that's pretty much the best way to sum up Fur, I think, is to just say she's nice. She's definitely a character. I would say she's good. I like her. She's not one of those characters where I'm like, I read the supports, I'm like, I have absolutely no interest in hearing anything about this character ever again. She's cool. I would enjoy if they had more content for her, which they don't, obviously, but she's a character that I would definitely say is pretty good. All right. Karel time. Karel supports 5 characters: Rutger, Noah, Fur, Bartre, and Zeiss. The thing about Karel is that Karel very much feels like we have Yoder at home. He's an older member of the army, and he is a very contemplative man who has made a lot of mistakes in his life. And they highlight that specific aspect of his character a lot more than they do with Yoder, admittedly, so it's a little bit distinct in that regard. But so many of his supports boil down to him being like a wise mentor figure, and I think it works a little bit better for Yoder than it does for Karel. It's not to say that Karel's supports are bad or anything, but I feel like Karel's supports are a little samey, and that he talks a lot about being the Sword Saint. everybody ever recognizes him as the Sword Saint. And it just comes up in every support, which is, it's important to his character, I guess. So it's not the end of the world, but I guess I just kind of got tired of reading it by the end. I think he brings a lot of good stuff out of Karel. Their support starts talking about swords or whatever the fuck, but then it turns into more of a Sakaen heritage conversation where Rutger's heart is clouded by revenge and bloodlust and all that, and Karel encourages him that once he gets that all sorted out, he will be able to connect once again with the culture that he, is so fond of, which Rutger is very happy about, seemingly. The Noah support is basically his backstory support, explaining that he used to be a savage monster who only cared about killing, but then he says that he lost something, basically, and that's implied to be Carla, his sister. I don't know if they actually name drop Carla here, but that's her name in later in the next game, basically. So her death has seemingly affected him profoundly, and he's now a completely changed man, essentially, which is interesting for sure. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit because now that I'm rereading these supports, I'm kind of like, I'm kind of into it. The first support is him just being like a good mentor figure, reminding Fur that, there's no point in chasing after him. She needs to forge her own path, etc., etc., the usual stuff. I honestly, I really, really like the Karel Fur A support. I want to draw attention to that in particular because I think it's a very profound. Maybe profound is the wrong word, but it's just really pleasant, and I like his mentality here. So I'm just gonna read it out. The context is that in the Beast support, he said that like everybody has a strength within them, and that's where your power as a swordsman comes from, not from the sword itself. Kind of generic stuff like that. So Fur says, "Please tell me, Uncle." Karel doesn't say anything, and so Fur's like, "What is your true strength? What is the way? What must I do?" Fur, "You were always looking at your mother's back and following after her." And Fur says nothing. "And now you come to me for advice because you have lost sight of your mother." "Yes. But Fur, you are not your mother, nor are you me. The path which you seek does not lie behind us, it lies in front of you. It is you who must cut open that path for yourself. In front of me? That isn't something that can be taught. It is something which you must discover on your own." And then she says, "Thank you." I think specifically the line, "the path which you seek does not lie behind us, it lies in front of you." I think that's just a really good line. I'm a big fan of it. Whoever wrote that is peak fiction. The Zeiss support is literally just the same thing, except like way worse. Where he's like, I mean, to be fair, Zeiss is not his niece. Zeiss is some random guy he met, so it makes sense that he'd give better advice to Fur than to Zeiss. But basically, Zeiss tells him his backstory about Gale and all that, and Karel's like, "Why are you telling me this?" And Zeiss is like, "Well, I was hoping that you could offer me some guidance." And he's like, "You gotta carve your own path." That's basically it. I think I was actually kind of thinking of this support when I was thinking of Karel in general. But honestly, this support is more of the exception than the rule. I think it's just like him kind of being stoic and, being like, "What do you think about that?" Giving very generic, mediocre advice. Okay. And last but not least, we have the Bartre support, which I like quite a bit just because it is, and we'll talk about, we'll segue into Bartre immediately afterward. But this is like the only support that Bartre has where he's actually being pretty much entirely serious. It's really just the two guys reconciling, because they both have the shared loss of Bartre losing his wife, and, that wife was Karel's sister. So it's just the two of them talking about their history with Carla. I looked, they do not name drop Carla anywhere here. It's kind of weird, actually. They could just given her a fucking name. Wouldn't have been that hard, but they keep saying like, "Oh, my sister," or "my wife," or "Fur's mother." It doesn't make any sense to me, but doesn't matter, I suppose. Bartre gives the full backstory of how they met, and it's a very cute little, story about how they kind of fell for each other. And Karel reflects on his actions of leaving. We don't get to see a ton of this, and that's fine. I think it's all right if it remains mostly, relatively unexplored. But choosing to leave Carla behind and spend his life chasing after, killing a whole bunch of people is, I'm sure, in many ways, is one of the biggest regrets that he has. And he wishes that he could have been by her side more. It seems like she... Actually, he didn't even know that Carla died until Fur told him, right? Here, hold on, let me check. Okay, this is the Serenus Forest script, so this might not be great. Okay, so he knew that she was sick, but he didn't know that she had died. So, he might have inferred though. So I think he regrets that, and I think you can kind of see it in the way that the support is written, where they're both just like processing their grief for the first time as, brothers-in-law, which is something. I think it's kind of cool, honestly. But yeah, overall not an amazing support or anything, but it is certainly one that I'm fairly fond of. All right. And last, but certainly not least for the day, we have Bartre. And honestly, maybe I shouldn't have saved him for last because he's mostly a comedy character. But I guess we can make this pretty quick as a result. He supports 5 characters: Fur, Gonzalez, Kath, Zeiss, and Karel. And I think all of these supports actually do tell us something about his character that's interesting. The first support, shows him being an overprotective dad and his regrets about what he couldn't do for his daughter when she really needed him the most. Gonzalez support gives us insight into how he views strength and what he thinks strength is, which is pretty cool. The Kath support, I haven't thought about this one in a while, but I like Bartre in this support a fair bit. Bartre gets a rare moment of seriousness here, kind of discussing how he thinks that Kath's father was not a coward, but instead just wanted to protect what he cared about. Homes can be rebuilt, lives cannot be brought back. So I think that's kind of, as a father himself, Bartre probably understands that mentality and is thinking about what he would do if he was in that situation with Fur. But Kath can't see it because she's, still hung up on the whole thing, hasn't really gotten over the trauma. I've already talked about the Karel support that I like. I think it's fairly good. And then the Zeiss support. The Zeiss support is just Bartre being unhinged. But even then, we do still get a little bit of insight into like how he views the mentality of strength. He's impressed with Zeiss for already being as strong as he is, and yet still wanting to get even stronger. Which he says that that's awesome, and that he's a fine young man who he wants to marry Fur, and who by the end of the support he's like, "Consider me your father," and starts calling him my son, which is very funny. I think that's a pretty funny support. So Bartre, good character. All these guys, for the most part, I think are actually pretty good. If I had to pick a favorite, it might actually be Bartre. I think he's genuinely just one of the funnier characters in the game for me. But overall, I'd say most of these guys are like at the middle / high end of the pack. So none of these guys are like close to being my favorite in the game, but they're all pretty good. So overall, I think Bartre. It could be Bartre, it could be Gonzalez, it could be Karel. It could kind of go either way. It's almost certainly not Echidna, if I'm going to be honest. But Fur is also a contender. I think they're all really good. If a bullet to my head had to pick one, I think I would say Bartre. But I think I could really go between any of those four. Okay. So that was the last SS episode. That was the last SSS episode for FE6. We're going to be doing something special for Roy in the wrap-up episode of FE6. So look forward to that. But in the meantime, the next proper SSS episode will be for FE7. I'm not going to say which characters we're doing for FE7 just yet. I kind of want it to be a surprise. You can probably figure out who it is, but I'm looking forward to it. I think they're going to be fun characters to talk about. I'm also not like 100% sure if I know exactly who I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I do. So anyway, that's all that I had for today. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.